In 1999, Star Wars fans were on top of the world. After 16 years without a new film, The Phantom Menace was set to kick off a brand new trilogy, promising epic lightsaber duels, groundbreaking visual effects, and a deeper dive into the lore of the galaxy far, far away. The hype was unreal. People camped outside of movie theaters, tickets sold out instantly, and fans were ready to relive the magic of their childhoods. And then, they actually saw the movie. A convoluted political plot about trade disputes, the mystique of the Force being reduced to midichlorians, and of course, Jar Jar Binks quickly turned excitement into disappointment. The backlash was immediate, and for the first time, George Lucas, the man who created Star Wars, found himself at odds with the very fanbase that once worshipped him. So how did it all go wrong? To answer that question, let's take a look at the time George Lucas pissed off the entire Star Wars fanbase. In the late 90s, George Lucas decided to test the waters before fully committing to a new Star Wars trilogy. The original films had been out of theaters for over a decade, and he wanted to see if there was still an appetite for the galaxy far, far away. His solution? The special editions. Re-releases of the original trilogy with updated effects, and a fresh theatrical run to reignite interest in Star Wars while subtly building hype for his upcoming prequels. The gamble paid off. The Star Wars special editions were a massive success, proving that fans were more than ready for new stories. However, Lucas wasn't just interested in re-releasing the movies, he wanted to fix them. Unsatisfied with the quality of many of the effect shots, due to the limitations of technology at the time that they were made, Lucas went back and made both minor and major changes in order to bring the films closer to what he had originally envisioned. The result was jarring. The new CGI additions to the film often clashed with the original practical effects, creating an odd mix of practical effects with mid-90s computer animation. Ironically, while Lucas had once thought the original effects looked outdated, his CGI-heavy changes have aged just as poorly by today's standards. And it wasn't just the visuals. He made other controversial changes, like making Greedo shoot first, to adding the musical number Jedi Rocks to Jabba's palace. Still, the special editions were a massive success, but for sharp-eyed fans, the warning signs were there, foreshadowing the creative choices that would spark even greater controversy in the prequels. When it came time to write The Phantom Menace, George Lucas initially didn't plan to do it alone. His first choice was Frank Darabont, who had previously written for the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, and was coming off the success of The Shawshank Redemption. However, negotiations quickly fell apart when Darabont realized Lucasfilm wasn't a Writers Guild of America signatory. George Lucas's long-standing feud with the Writers Guild of America and Directors Guild of America dates back to The Empire Strikes Back. The dispute arose when Lucas refused to include the traditional opening credits, instead opting for the now iconic Star Wars crawl. The DGA fined him for the violation, and in response, Lucas left both guilds, determined to work independently on all future projects. As a result of not being able to hire a writer who would go against the guild, Lucas would end up writing episode 1 himself. When he finished, and just weeks before shooting, he ran into Lawrence Kasdan, who had helped write The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. Lucas would ask Kasdan if he wanted to take a second pass at the script. However, Kasdan would decline, realizing he'd have little room to make meaningful changes with production just about to begin, saying, "For George, the movie is bigger than the script." And while Lucas is incredible at storytelling and world building, screenwriting was never his strong suit, with A New Hope famously going through multiple drastic rewrites, as Lucas would rely on filmmaker friends like Brian De Palma to help him refine the script. Even then, the dialogue was notoriously clunky, leading to Harrison Ford's legendary gripe, "You can type this stuff, but you can't say it." Directing The Phantom Menace wasn't Lucas's first choice either. He initially approached Robert Zemeckis, Steven Spielberg, and Ron Howard, hoping one of them would take on the challenge. But all three turned him down, with Howard later recalling, "Nobody wanted to follow up Star Wars. It was an honor to be asked, but it would have been too daunting." In the end, Lucas was left with no choice but to direct it himself, a task he hadn't taken on since A New Hope. However, his direction was just as derided as his writing, often giving actors little guidance beyond broad instructions. Mark Hamill once joked that Lucas's most frequent piece of direction was simply faster and more intense. Nowhere is this more evident than in The Escape from Naboo. As Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, and Amidala flee under heavy fire from Trade Federation ships, the scene should have been tense and urgent, but the actors' performances were flat and emotionless, as Lucas struggled to guide his cast toward the needed energy required for the scene. Later in the editing room, Lucas realized the scene fell flat, when the actors' lifeless performances clashed with the intensity of ILM's visual effect shots. As a result, Lucas would reshoot the scene, but even then, he still couldn't bring the performances he wanted out of the actors. Frustrated, he resorted to digitally compositing different performances from multiple takes, stitching together reactions and dialogue in post-production. This approach deeply concerned his editor, Ben Burt, who believed it was a dangerous precedent, vastly complicating the editing process by exponentially increasing the number of choices in the cut. Normally, a take is either used or rejected, but now Lucas was assembling shots like a puzzle, a process that not only burdened the post-production team, but also highlighted the weaknesses of his on-set direction. One of the most controversial additions to The Phantom Menace was the introduction of Midichlorians, microscopic organisms that reside in living cells, and serve as a conduit for the Force. This explanation stood in stark contrast to Obi-Wan's original description in A New Hope, where he framed the Force as an all-encompassing energy field that surrounds us and penetrates us and binds the galaxy together. In contrast, Qui-Gon Jinn's scientific breakdown turned the Force from a mystical spiritual power into something quantifiable. While this was an easy narrative device to emphasize Anakin Skywalker's uniqueness, his astronomical midichlorian count prompting Obi-Wan to exclaim, "Even Master Yoda doesn't have a midichlorian count that high," many fans felt it demystified the Force, stripping away the wonder and reducing it to a biological metric. And one of the biggest sources of fan backlash in The Phantom Menace was Jar Jar Binks, a bumbling, slapstick-driven Gungan that George Lucas designed as comic relief. Intended to amuse younger audiences, Jar Jar's clumsy antics and exaggerated speech instead grated on many fans, who found him irritating and tonally out of place. But the criticism didn't stop at his comedic ineptitude. Many also took issue with how his mannerisms and speech patterns seemed to evoke racial stereotypes. This wasn't the only case of questionable depictions in the film. The Trade Federation's leaders bore an uncomfortable resemblance to outdated Asian stereotypes. Meanwhile, Watto, the greedy junk dealer on Tatooine, was widely noticed for his resemblance, both in appearance and personality, to anti-Semitic caricatures of Jewish merchants. While Lucas always maintained that none of this was intentional, the combination of these portrayals left a bad taste for many fans and critics, adding another layer of controversy to a film already struggling with its reception. One of the biggest shocks for fans of the original Star Wars trilogy was how drastically The Phantom Menace shifted in tone. The original films were swashbuckling space adventures, full of daring escapes, high-stakes battles, and charismatic heroes taking on a powerful empire. In contrast, The Phantom Menace was far more subdued, bogged down by trade disputes, political maneuvering, and long-winded discussions in lavishly decorated rooms. Another major point of contention in The Phantom Menace was the portrayal of a young Anakin Skywalker, played by Jake Lloyd. In A New Hope, Obi-Wan describes Anakin as the best star pilot in the galaxy, yet here he was reimagined as a wide-eyed, innocent child who accidentally blows up the Trade Federation control ship while button mashing his starfighter controls. Nobody wanted to see one of history's greatest villains as a precocious kid shouting, "Now this is pod racing." The unfair backlash against Lloyd was so intense that it followed him into adulthood, with the young actor ultimately quitting Hollywood due to relentless bullying and criticism. Following a rough-cut screening of the film, producer Rick McCallum was likely the first person to experience what many fans would soon feel, sitting in stunned silence, realizing it wasn't the Star Wars they had grown up with. The hype for The Phantom Menace was unlike anything the movie industry had seen. Fans camped outside theaters for weeks, eager to be among the first to see the long-awaited return of Star Wars. The anticipation was so intense that when the first trailer dropped, people bought tickets to meet Joe Black, just to watch it, then promptly walked out before the movie even started. But when the film finally arrived, the excitement quickly turned to disappointment for many. Even Empire Strikes Back co-writer Lawrence Kasdan was left bewildered, later recalling, "I was at the first screening of The Phantom Menace, and it was just so different that I didn't really know what to make of it. It had no connection in my mind to what we had done." Your eyes are just like, what? How does this work? For Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, Lucas recognized his weaknesses and sought outside help. Acknowledging his reputation for stiff, unnatural dialogue, he brought in Jonathan Hales to assist with the script for Attack of the Clones, while Revenge of the Sith saw the addition of Christopher Neal as a dialogue coach to help refine the actors' performances. Despite these efforts, criticisms of awkward writing and wooden delivery persisted. However, in the years since their release, the Star Wars prequels have undergone a significant re-evaluation. The divisive reception of the sequel trilogy has led many fans to develop a newfound appreciation for Lucas's vision, world building, and overarching themes. Additionally, those who grew up with the prequels as children have since embraced them with nostalgia, cementing their place as a beloved, if imperfect, corner of the Star Wars saga. Thanks for watching, everybody, and don't forget to like and subscribe to Bullets and Blockbusters for more great content.